In a quiet suburban neighborhood, signs of a missing girl are plastered on every tree and light post, but Edgar, unfazed, drives through the streets, munching on gummies and nursing a wounded hand. As he circles the town, he stops to gather what he needs from his van: a gun, some rope, and a collection of cell phones before heading to the outskirts of the city. There, he enters an old, dilapidated building, its dark, silent corners hiding the horrors to come. Meanwhile, Nell suddenly awakens in a sealed room, disoriented and confused, with no memory of how she ended up there. The chilling sense of captivity begins to set in as the truth of her situation unfolds. The room is eerily silent, its only contents a bug crawling across the floor, a digital clock on the wall, a speaker, and a large panel displaying the number 9 matching the one on Nell's shirt. Trembling, she stumbles toward the bolted door, her hands desperately pushing and pulling, but it won't budge. Her cries for help echo in the emptiness, yet no one responds. Suddenly, the clock flickers to life, starting to count up the seconds as they slip away, each tick amplifying her growing fear. Her gaze drifts to a red rope lying ominously on the floor, adding to the unsettling mystery of the room. As Nell shifts the rope, her heart leaps with a flicker of hope when she finds her phone hidden beneath it. But that hope quickly fades as she realizes the SIM card has been removed, rendering the device useless for an emergency call. Frustrated, she stretches the rope across the room, its length sending a chill down her spine as she imagines the grim task they expect her to carry out with it. The tension rises when she stumbles upon a dark stain on the floor eerily resembling blood. Her pulse quickens, and as she looks up, she spots a glass hatch in the ceiling, revealing the night sky above. Desperation takes hold as she jumps repeatedly, but no matter how hard she tries, she can't reach the knob to open it, her efforts only deepening the sense of helplessness closing in around her. Panic begins to creep into Nell as she paces the sterile room, her mind racing with the question of why she's here and what's coming next. Suddenly, an alarm blares, and the room's light shifts to a haunting green, sending a surge of dread through her. Instinctively, Nell drops to the floor, bracing herself for whatever horrors might follow, but just as quickly as it began, the alarm stops and the light flickers back off. Breathing a sigh of relief, she reaches for the phone again, desperate to find anything that might offer a clue. To her dismay, all the contacts have been deleted, leaving her isolated. However, as she scrolls through the photo gallery, she finds a series of ocean pictures, their tranquil beauty evoking the calming verses of a poem, offering a fleeting moment of peace amidst the chaos. Among the photos, Nell spots one of Dawn, a sight that fills her with both joy and confusion. Why did she leave her behind? The thought of seeing her again ignites a spark of determination. In a desperate attempt to get someone's attention, Nell removes a shoe and throws it at the hatch, hoping to either hit the knob or cause a distraction, but it's futile. Frustration boils over as she picks up her phone and hurls it against the wall in a burst of anger, only for it to land precariously on the number 9 panel. To her shock, the phone begins playing a haunting song called The Stranger, its eerie melody filling the room and deepening the mystery of her captivity. The soothing sound of The Stranger offers Nell a brief sense of comfort, but her attention quickly shifts to the panel in front of her, where she notices a small hole has appeared. With renewed hope, she digs at it, eager to widen it and find an escape route, but all she uncovers is more wall behind it. Just as her frustration grows, the clock hits 15 minutes, its beeping signaling something ominous as the lights suddenly flicker out. Outside, the unsettling sounds of doors and windows creaking open and shut send a fresh wave of panic through her. Desperate to calm herself, Nell closes her eyes and recites the ocean poem, focusing on the peaceful verses to stave off an anxiety attack. Within seconds, the lights flash back on, and when she opens her eyes, she is stunned to see the bolts on the door have vanished, leaving it wide open for her to escape. Nell's brief moment of hope shatters when she opens the door, only to find more wall on the other side, a crushing dead end. As the reality sinks in, the clock suddenly shifts to 45 minutes and begins its ominous countdown, making Nell snap at it in frustration. Almost immediately, the green light flickers back on for a few seconds, intensifying her unease. But then something unexpected happens. A male voice, eerily familiar, echoes her insult, coming from a vent on the wall behind the door. Her heart leaps. There's someone else. Desperate for a connection, she moves closer to the vent, calling out into the darkness. To her relief, she hears a response from Travis, a fellow prisoner, who reveals that he's locked in a room just like hers, only his number is 6. Travis assures Nell that he has no idea who has captured them or why they're there, but his questions grow increasingly strange, like asking if she has a chair in her room. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, Edgar watches their every move through the security cameras, observing from the shadows. When the topic of the rope arises, Nell voices her concerns about its dark implications, but Travis shifts focus to the practical side, explaining that he'd tried using it to open the hatch, only to have it snap. He warns her that the knob won't hold, but Nell, unwilling to give up, attempts it anyway, using the rope to tie a strong knot around the knob in a desperate bid for freedom. Desperately, Nell pulls on the rope, but it fails to hold her weight, and the knob breaks, sending her crashing to the ground with a sharp jolt that dislocates her shoulder. The pain explodes in her body as her ears ring, and she loses consciousness, her gaze lingering on Dawn's picture on the phone. She comes to just moments later, hearing Travis calling her name, but the ringing in her ears continues, and she briefly envisions bubble wrap being cut above her face, a strange image that lingers in her foggy mind. As the pain pulses through her, Travis urgently reminds her to fix her shoulder before the effects of adrenaline wear off, his voice cutting through the haze of confusion and pain. At first, Nell refuses to listen to Travis, blaming him for the predicament she's in, but as the pain in her shoulder intensifies, she reluctantly begins to accept that he might have a point. Leaning against the edge of the door for support, she grits her teeth and forces her shoulder back into place, the sharp pain making her stomach churn. Trying to push past the discomfort, Nell starts talking to Travis to distract herself, playing the song on her phone. To her surprise, Travis whistles along, revealing it's a favorite of his too. As they share their thoughts on the music, a sense of fleeting connection forms between them until, suddenly, her ears begin to ring again, and she has another unsettling vision. In the midst of her vision, Nell sees a man looming in front of her, his hand reaching for her wrists. Desperate to defend herself, she grabs a pen from his pocket and strikes out, injuring his hand in the process. As the unsettling scene fades, Travis shifts the conversation to more philosophical ground, asking Nell if she thinks she deserves to be there. He certainly thinks he does. He goes on to speculate about the possibility of divine intervention, pondering if some higher power has placed them in this hellish situation for a reason. Their deep discussion about fate and God's will is abruptly cut short when Travis suddenly yells, his voice filled with panic as he warns someone to stay away from him. The lights in Nell's room flicker green once again, and seeing Travis strike the other end of the vent sends a wave of panic crashing over her, triggering an anxiety attack. She struggles to push through the overwhelming fear, clinging to the soothing words of the ocean poem she repeats to herself. When the lights return to normal, she tries to talk to Travis, who cryptically mentions a man who came to fix him, implying someone had hurt him, as he suffers from a brutal headache. As the green light flickers on and off again, Nell swears to herself that she will find a way out. Determined, she begins searching the room once more, and this time, she discovers a wire hidden behind the panel, though she quickly realizes it's of little use to her. As Nell absent-mindedly touches her arm, a strange sensation makes her stop. Something has been inserted under her skin. In a moment of shared discomfort, Travis admits he has something similar embedded in his leg, which itches unbearably. Realizing they're running out of time, Nell forces herself to think of a new plan. She decides to use the hatch knob to unscrew the vent, and to her relief, the idea works. With the vent open, Travis eagerly begins to follow her lead, and Nell, not wasting a moment, returns to the wire hidden behind the panel. As she pulls it through both the panel and the wall, Her fingers brush against something hard, an unexpected discovery, a hidden camera. Determined to expose the truth, she carefully passes the camera through the vent to show Travis, her heart racing with the weight of their discovery. With a decisive snap, Nell breaks the wire, cutting off Edgar's access to her room. Determined to escape, she crawls into the vent, but the tight, cramped space makes every movement a struggle. As she pushes forward, she encounters a green light in the middle of the vent. The moment she touches it, the room is flooded with a blinding yellow light, and an alarm blares to life, its deafening sound piercing through her ears. Panic surges as Nell quickly retreats, but in her haste, she slams her injured shoulder against the sharp edge of the vent, sending a fresh wave of pain through her. The jolt triggers another vision, and this time, Nell looks down to find her hands covered in blood, the sight chilling her to the core. After the sharp pain subsides, Nell urges Travis to continue working on the vent while she focuses on her shoulder, which has dislocated once again. This time, she braces herself against the panel, and as she adjusts her shoulder, she notices something startling: she's bleeding. The injury is centered on the bulge of her arm, and as the blood seeps out, she realizes that the wound gives her the chance to finally remove whatever had been implanted under her skin. To her horror, she pulls out a small microchip. Though the discovery is unsettling, there's little she can do with it. Shaking off the shock, she moves back to Travis, only to find he's hit another obstacle. He can't finish unscrewing the vent because his knob is broken, leaving him stuck in the same place. With only 1 minute left on the clock, it turns red, signaling that time is running out. Nell urgently tells Travis to try using sheer strength to open the vent. As he recites the ocean poem, Travis pulls with all of his might, and just as the clock hits 0, he succeeds in opening the vent. But the end of the countdown brings nothing but bad news. The lights flicker out, the door slams shut again, and the bolts snap back into place, cutting off Nell's access to Travis. In the few seconds of darkness that follow, Nell's anger erupts. When the lights flicker back on, she abandons her attempt to calm herself with the poem and instead admits aloud, her voice filled with raw emotion, that things aren't fine, and she's not safe, not at all. Out of nowhere, a small opening appears in the door, revealing a bright red light on the other side. With trembling hands, Nell cautiously slips her arm through, and to her shock, she pulls out a loaded gun. As soon as the weapon is in her hands, the lights switch to green, and a strange gas begins seeping into the room, triggering a fresh wave of panic in Nell. Desperate, she starts yelling, questioning whether she should just end it all when the lights flicker once more, shifting through colors. That's when it hits her, the lights aren't random. They're tied to a sound pressure meter, and she realizes she needs to reach red to gain control of the situation. Determined to break free, Nell shoots the glass hatch, shattering it and sending the lights to red for a few precious seconds. Watching from a new camera, Edgar sees her action, but Nell doesn't hesitate. She grabs the bug, then throws the rope up through the hatch, securing it tightly in place, giving herself a potential escape route. Her heart races with hope, but the moment she climbs through, her expectations are shattered. Instead of finding herself on a roof, she's inside a different room, surrounded by screens that display the night sky above her and the cells where she and Travis had been trapped. The screens flicker, and to her horror, they now show the word end. Nell, desperate to check on Travis, peers through his hatch only to receive the worst news imaginable. His room had been filled with gas too, and it was so suffocating that Travis had used the gun to end it all, triggering the lights to turn red in the process. She feels the weight of his loss, but there's no time to grieve. Edgar is on the move, leaving his office to check on them. Nell quickly hides against the wall, holding her breath, and once she's certain Edgar can't see her, she makes her move, crossing the office with stealth and gaining access to the rest of the building. As she sneaks through, she realizes the place seems to belong to some high-end company, an unsettling thought in the midst of her desperate escape. As Nell races through the empty corridors, she notices the daylight streaming through the windows, but there's an eerie stillness. No one else is around. The only sound breaks the silence from a room up ahead, where a television plays a looping video of Travis, smiling as he promotes robots so lifelike that they're indistinguishable from humans. Sickened by the sight of his face, Nell snaps, using the gun to shatter the screen before storming out of the room. She continues down another hallway, only to stop dead in her tracks when she comes across a giant photograph of Dawn, standing proudly as the director of the very robotics company that has trapped her. Just as Nell stands frozen in shock, a guide appears behind her, leading a group of visitors who are being given a tour of the facility. They glance at the photograph of Dawn, but none of them acknowledge Nell as they continue on their way. Before Nell can process what's happening, Edgar suddenly appears, triggering a horrifying memory. He's the man who had been cutting the bubble wrap above her face, and the one she had hurt with the pen. Panic floods her as she raises the gun to defend herself, but Edgar merely presses a button on his tablet, and to her horror, she freezes in place. It's then that Edgar reveals the chilling truth: Nell has been a company robot all along, Model 9. When she finally regains consciousness, she finds herself sitting by the ocean, a surreal scene straight out of the pictures she had seen earlier. Edgar appears, tossing a gummy at Nell, a petty act of revenge for the pain she caused his hand, and he explains that it's also the reason the program has now bound her to the chair, unable to escape. The ocean scene around her, so tranquil and serene, has been meticulously designed to cater to her comfort, and Edgar makes her an offer. He will let her go, but only if she answers his questions about her time in the cell. As Nell listens, the chilling truth unfolds: her imprisonment was a test, a way to evaluate the robot's capacity to feel human emotions. She and Travis were meant to form a connection, and they did, growing to care deeply for each other's safety, proving that their bond went beyond mere programming. Edgar presses further, asking if Nell has ever questioned her humanity, and in that moment, a crushing realization hits her: she doesn't even understand who she truly is. She learns that she's been trapped in this cycle week after week, with each test aimed at working out the glitches in her system so they can move on to creating Model 10. At the end of every trial, her memories are erased, wiping the slate clean as if nothing ever happened. Overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation, Nell shuts down, refusing to answer any more questions. Instead, she clings to the only thing that offers her some semblance of comfort. She recites the poem, retreating into the safety of her own mind to escape the truth she can no longer bear. Realizing there's nothing more he can do with her for the day, Edgar powers Nell down and returns her to the cell, where she regains consciousness, once again with no memories of the events that have transpired. As she comes to, confused and unaware, Edgar walks away, leaving her behind to enjoy his weekend with his family, seemingly unaffected by the cycle of torment he's put her through.